All right, hello and hello to everyone. Welcome members and friends to the October general meeting of the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake. Before we start, I just want to make a few announcements and let everyone know that all recordings of this event, whether they be in person or on a computer screen, may not be used without the express written approval of the League. The League will only allow audio video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by media reporting on the event. A recording will be made available to the public on our website after tonight's meeting. As has been our tradition, the League of Women Voters would like to formally begin this event by acknowledging that we are on Indigenous land originally inhabited and nurtured by the Ute, Goshu, Shoshone, Paiute, and Navajo people. We honor their stewardship and the critical role they play in our community today. And we pledge to support ongoing efforts for racial justice and to treat this space and the land we inhabit here, physically and virtually, with reverence and respect. I'm Shauna Bona, President-elect of the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Before we dive into our topic, which is ranked choice voting, I have an announcement that should be of interest to all Salt Lake County residents and actually all Utah residents. We only have a few days left for you to have input on the redistricting maps that the Independent Redistricting Commission teams are considering. The three teams are looking at the maps that they've tentatively drawn, and they're revising them based on comments they received from public meetings and the website. The last day for comments on the website is October 23rd. Because of low population growth in the north end of Salt Lake, Utah House and Senate districts will grow larger to reach the required population numbers for Utah Senate district and House districts. So please let the commission know the configuration you favor. Go to https://uirc.utah.gov, which I will place into the chat. Okay. All right. With that, our format tonight is very simple. We hope for a free-flowing educational conversation, not a debate by any means. We've gathered experts here to talk with us, and we've gathered 5 questions from our members. And some of these questions are for all of the panelists and some are specific to your roles. And what we'll do is we'll go through those questions and then we'll turn our attention to the audience for their questions. So to make sure that we have plenty of time for that, we'd like to ask you, our panelists, to try to keep your answers as succinct as you can while still, making sure that we all get it. And for you in the audience, please submit your questions through the Q&A function in your Zoom window. And rather than having our panelists be watching for your questions, we've asked Donnie Davis, our program director for the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake, to monitor the Q&A, and she's going to ask as many questions as possible on your behalf when we get to that place in our format, which will likely be around 8 o'clock. Okay, so now to introduce our panelists. First, thank you so much for being here. And let me go through. I'm going to start with Stan Lockhart. Stan Lockhart has been involved in Utah elections for over 30 years. He served as a Provo City Council member, former chair of the Utah Republican Party, and a member of the Utah State Board of Education. His late wife, Becky, served 16 years in the Utah legislature and was the first female Speaker of the House. Stan is an advocate for ranked choice voting because until recently, Utah had over 30 years of declining voter participation, and he wants to reverse that trend. America's founding fathers wrote that the success of our republic was contingent on informed voters and engaged electorate. Kelleen Potter grew up in Ogden and graduated from BYU with a degree in political science and secondary education. Later, she earned her master's degree in public administration at BYU. Kelleen was the director of elections during the Leavitt administration and is now working as a consultant with the Utah Ranked Choice Voting. Kelleen is currently running for her second term as mayor of Heber City and serves on many boards and committees at the local and state levels. She has 5 children and loves that she gets to live where she can get out for a quick hike, bike ride, or a few runs on the ski slope before work. Sherrie Swensen, Salt Lake County Clerk, directs the election, marriage, passport, and council clerk divisions for Salt Lake County. Sherrie believes in the fundamental right of all citizens to vote, and to that end encourages voter participation by making the process as easy and accessible as possible. She promoted a permanent vote by mail program and implemented a vote by mail system so registered voters are automatically mailed a ballot for each election in which they are eligible to vote. She is serving her 8th term as county clerk. And last but not least, Kory Holdaway, who, have we lost Kory? I'm going to introduce him, even though I think he dropped for a sec. He is a former state legislator who has long been involved in Utah elections. He is concerned about the lack of civic engagement and voter participation among Utah's younger generations and is looking for a better way to engage them. He has worked as a mental health worker and a special education teacher for the Granite School District and now runs a government affairs and consulting business. He and Lockhart are principals in Utah Ranked Choice Voting, a resource for municipal governments as they prepare a pilot ranked choice voting. Okay, so welcome and thank you. As you can all see, we have a very prestigious group of people available to us. And I want to start out by making sure that everyone understands what ranked choice voting is and where it has been used in Utah and in the nation. And I'm going to ask you, Stan, if you could kind of walk us through that and explain to people what it is and where it's been used.
Yeah, so ranked choice voting is, instead of just circling one person on a ballot, you get a chance to rank them in order of preference. So if there are 5 people on the ballot, you have the opportunity to rank them 1 through 5. You're not forced to rank all candidates. You rank as many as you prefer, but it's an opportunity for a voter to more fully express their will at the ballot box. It's been used all over the country, really for the last 20 years or so. It started being used back east and then actually made a jump to the West Coast, and then has kind of been filling in the middle ever since. But one of the things we're really proud of is that the 23 cities that opted into ranked choice voting this year is the largest group of cities in any state to ever use ranked choice voting in a municipal election year. So we're really proud of that in Utah. And 2 years ago, we had 2 cities opt in. This year, we had 23 cities. It's a pilot project of the legislature in an attempt to see how Utah voters respond to this type of voting, because they've been considering it for partisan elections. And so we think we're going to have a really good test case this year on how Utah voters respond to ranked choice voting.
Great, thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to add anything to that explanation? It's quite good. I want to kind of maybe did I move too fast? Okay, I want to kind of ask you another question. I think, like, for me as a voter, like, I get really well how the first round of tallying works, but I think it's after you get to those second and third rounds that sometimes people might not have a full understanding. And I wonder if it would be possible for you to explain just a little bit briefly how after the first round, what happens, and then what happens at the second round for tallying purposes.
Sure. So you want to view ranked choice voting as a choice with a bunch of backup options. So if you have a number 1 choice, and as they go through the round by round balloting, because another term for ranked choice voting is instant runoff voting. It's a series of instant runoffs. And the candidate who receives the lowest number of votes round by round goes out. And then those votes get redistributed based on the next choice, the backup choice of those voters. And then that continues until you get to 2 candidates. And then one of the winning candidates gets more than 50% of the votes. And that's the way to learn. Yes.
The one thing I would add where people start to get confused is it's not a retally of everyone's votes. It's only a redistribution of those whose candidate had the fewest number of votes. So it's their second choice, because the candidate that you chose as first, if your candidate wasn't eliminated, is still in play or still eligible to be elected.
Kory, if you're looking at this Zoom call from your office, it's the coolest bit of background that we've ever seen.
Yeah, yeah. This is my office.
I think that's really, really helpful. Thank you. And then if after you drop off, say, so the least favorable candidate, all their second choice peoples are considered. And then you go to the second to the least and so on and so on. Okay. Now I want to just ask all of you what your kind of thoughts on this are. I'd like to just ask you, are you enthusiastic or hesitant about implementing ranked choice voting, and why? And I'd like to start with you first, Kelleen, if that's okay.
You bet. I'm very enthusiastic about it. We've had some interesting elections in Heber City, and just one of the things we don't talk about a lot is when a candidate withdraws from the race and their name's already on the ballot. And I've seen elections change because a number of votes went to a candidate who withdrew before the election. And that really is a wasted vote when someone doesn't know that that person decided, a few days before they didn't want to run anymore. And I think this solves that problem. We often in our city have people campaigning saying, if there's 2 seats open or 3 seats, just vote for me. Or, there's all these strategy things. And they're just really, with ranked choice voting, it's just pretty straightforward. Like, this is who I like. This is if they don't win, I want this person second and third. And I feel like it simplifies it for voters when sometimes this whole process of elections and politics and government is so overwhelming and people are so frustrated. And to be able to go in there and go, I don't have to play any games. I don't have to assess whether my candidate has a chance or not. I just get to say, here's who I want and here's the order I want them. And I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to see how more Utah voters respond and what they say after they've had the opportunity to vote in a ranked choice election.
Thank you. Sherrie, what about you?
So when the law was passed in 2018 that allowed for ranked choice voting, we started hearing from some cities that would like to have implemented it. We did not have the tabulation equipment or software that would allow us to even format a ballot or offer ranked choice voting to the municipalities. We contract to conduct their elections. It's not my statutory duty in an odd numbered year to conduct the municipal elections, but we've offered contracts for the city elections for many years. So when they started asking if we would conduct the elections with ranked choice voting, we had to get a system and put it in place that would accommodate that. And so since we now have a new system just implemented this year, we could offer that option to the cities. And I feel like it's their election. We want to conduct the elections in the manner in which they want their elections conducted. And so it was a choice of their city councils or their legislative bodies, sometimes include their mayor. But anyway, based on that, we had 10 municipalities opt to have their elections conducted with ranked choice voting. And so we wanted to honor their decision. And we have moved forward to try to make that change. It has not been simple. I must say it isn't faster, easier, cheaper for us. It's been complex, but part of that complexity is because it's new. And given that, we feel like we can conduct a very good election for them. A lot of the complexity was just formatting the ballot. We have 79 different ballot faces in this election in Salt Lake County. And you can imagine we're trying to put the instructions together. And I feel like our instructions are very comprehensive. That was my goal, to make sure that when people saw their ballot, they would understand that the instructions for the ranked choice, how to do it right, how to do it wrong, or not, or how they didn't do it wrong, were right there on the ballot. And then in conjunction with that, I think Salt Lake County might be a little bit unique because we also offer contract services for local service districts. And those service districts overlay the boundaries of the municipalities. And so on a particular ballot format, we had many of the local service districts on some of the ballot formats. And when we had those first versions of the ballots that were laid out, we couldn't utilize like a column right next to the ranked choice contest with a local service district because it would have been so confusing to the voter. And so we had to make sure that we put that underneath. And it was just challenging to get it laid out in a way that the voters would be able to recognize the different versions of voting within one ballot. And then we've got the municipalities, of course, that are doing the standard type elections. And so with that, we've tried to insert different ballot instructions depending on which type of election that municipality has. And we've tried to develop an FAQ for our website. I think it's very good. We've got video examples on our website that explain the tabulation. And I think we've had a lot of compliments on that. So that's what we've tried to achieve, just to do the elections the way the legislative bodies and the municipalities wanted them done.
Well, I was actually the next question that I was gonna actually have was asking you specifically, Sherrie, about the challenges that you faced, and you've actually really laid out several of them. So before I move over to Stan and ask him, I just want to make sure that I pause. And are there any other challenges that you wanted to kind of bring up that all of us as voters should be taking into consideration?
You know, the people we're hearing from right now are the ones that are having the questions. Do I have to rank all these candidates? Why are there so many? How do I fill out the ballot? Some of them are upset, quite frankly. We're hearing from those. We're not hearing from the people who like it, quite honestly. You never hear from the people who are happy about it.
Yeah.
I'm getting some emails that are angry at me. We're getting phone calls, and they think I just did this by myself. I made this decision all by myself, and we're explaining that and how it came about. And I've handed out an email version that I'm answering to the people that are emailing me and giving it to my staff to explain to the voters who call how it came about with a pilot project that was passed by the legislature, and it was a decision from the municipal legislative bodies. So they're explaining that. They're helping the voters understand this. They don't have to rank all the candidates. They are walking them through it very patiently. So those are the challenges to have them understand how it came about, why it came about. And, you know, as far as the cities that were able to save the cost of the primary, that was a benefit to those cities because it did save them money.
Thank you. So Stan, I'll just remind you of my original question since I kind of blended two there, but you know, I think I can guess that you're enthusiastic about it, but maybe if you want to say a little bit about why.
Yeah, so I think for me, I love this idea that voters can more fully express their will at the ballot box. So if you go look at the way our country was founded, where the framers of our Constitution very carefully and deliberately set up this representative form of government, the ballot box is the key to its success. If they can't find a way to elect good leaders, then we're going to get what we're going to get the type of government that results with leaders that aren't the best they can be. And so to give voters the freedom to choose and to, we say more fully express their will, but instead of just circling one, they can circle more than one, essentially by ranking their choices. And so there are many games that are played under traditional plurality voting. So I'm going to give you a couple of those examples of, and ranked choice voting totally gets rid of these problems. So sometimes you'll get into an election and you'll have four candidates, let's say, and three of them are very similar to each other. And by the time the election's over, those three candidates split the majority of the vote. And the fourth candidate that has a plurality that has less than a majority slides in because they got a slightly higher percentage than the three that split the vote. And you could have 70% of your voters want one of those three candidates and not want that fourth candidate. And yet they'll still slip in and get elected because the other three split the vote, as it's called. In other cases, not so much in Utah, but in other states, you will have candidates actually recruit other candidates to run against them from other parties to weaken their chief opponent's opportunity. So for instance, in a Republican-Democrat race, if you're a Republican, you might want to recruit someone from the Green Party to run in that race because they'll sift votes away from the Democrat. Or if I'm a Democrat, I'll recruit a Libertarian to run so that they can sift votes away from the Republican. And that happens all over this country. And it is a strategic move on the part of candidates to try to win elections without getting a true majority. And so ranked choice voting, you can't play those games. You just cannot play those games. The other thing that happens is sometimes your favorite candidate has no chance by all the pollsters. And yet you believe that they really would make the best elected official. Under the system of plurality, you would never choose them because it disenfranchises your vote if you truly believe they have no chance. And you're going to pivot to those that seem to be the front runners, and you're going to choose between one of them, even though they're really not your preferred candidate. And so all of those games, those mathematical equations that you have to play in your head. So I'll give you an example. Evan McMullin came in 2016 and he ran for president. And when he came to our state, immediately he started shooting up in the polls. And what did the Trump campaign say about Evan McMullin? A vote for McMullin is a vote for Hillary. And almost immediately he plateaued and started going down in voter support. And in the end, he was unable to do much more because voters in their mind had it straight. Oh, if I vote for McMullin, it's as if I'm voting for Hillary because, and if she's my least favorite choice, I can't vote for McMullin because I've got to settle for someone else. Mm-hmm. So we go through these mathematical equations under plurality voting that we do not need to go through when we do ranked choice voting. So for the voter, it's just more pure. It's an easier way for the voter to fully express who they want most, and then who they want second most, and so on. And so that's what I love the most, is that it kind of fulfills this whole idea of a representative republic or a representative democracy, depending on how you look at it. And that's what's most appealing about it for me.
Thank you. Kory, we are answering the question right now. Well, the question is, are you enthusiastic or hesitant about ranked choice voting, and why? So if you'd like, oh, we can't, but turn off your, hey, you have your mute on.
Hey, where's your background, Kory? Where's that moving background that I just saw?
I know. I got to where I needed to be. I apologize. I really am sorry. I'm very embarrassed that I was caught with technical difficulties. Normally that doesn't happen. So to your audience, I apologize profusely. But to answer your question, I am very enthusiastic about this. And I'm going to give you an example of one of the reasons why I'm enthusiastic. I live in an area that is using ranked choice voting, and I received from two candidates. There's three candidates in the race that for city council where I'm at, and I received a piece of literature in the mail yesterday that on one side of the mailer was vote for me, I'm the best, and choose Tom as number 2. And then on the flip side, it said, vote for Tom, choose the other guy as number 2. So they're kind of using this in a way that I had hoped would work very well in terms of just the type of campaigns that are being run. They're more inclusive with one another. They're more about ideas. They're more about trying to get to what the issues are rather than personalities so much. And that's frankly, I think, one of the things that our country needs more of, instead of some of the bickering and mudslinging and the like that goes on in campaigns. It seems like it's gotten worse, and this for me was refreshing.
I know we've all had a chance to ask this, but does anybody have any final thoughts that they want to share about the why, about being somewhat hesitant, or the why about being enthusiastic? Well,
Shauna,
yeah.
let me just say this. For many years, I was one of the naysayers on ranked choice voting. So ranked choice voting came into my world through the Republican Party back in the mid-90s. And conservative grassroots Republican activists brought it to the Republican Party and wanted to use it in conventions and in the caucuses. And I fought against it, and I fought against it, and I fought against it, because I was just sure that they knew something I didn't, that somehow there was a game, because in plurality voting, it's all about the game.
Mhm.
And if you understand how to play the game in plurality voting, many times you can manipulate the outcome of an election. And with ranked choice voting, I was just sure there's the same games were out there. And come to find out, there really are no games for the voters. Now, for candidates, you've got to campaign differently. And for tabulation, the tabulation is different. There's no question on that, on those sides. But for the voter, it's so refreshing that they don't have to go through all those games. And so once I figured that out, and it took me years to figure that out, but once I figured out that no, this is not about games for voters, this gets rid of the games, that's when it became meaningful, and really was when I began to support ranked choice voting.
Well, let me kind of push on this gaming idea. I hope this isn't I'm not sure if this feels like it's gaming, but I do want to ask you just kind of briefly, if you have, three candidates, and one of them is you feel much better than the other two, does it help them, does it help that number one person, or hurt them if you go 1, 2, 3 versus just voting for the one that you like, and it kind of exhausting your ballot and not giving a 2 or a 3? Because I've been asked that by quite a few people. Should I just vote for my guy and let the rest slide, because that's what's going to help him the most? What are your thoughts there? Because I think people want to know that.
I can answer, but I've already taken up the majority of the time.
Kory, do you want to answer?
Yeah,
or-
I'm happy to jump in there, and maybe Kelleen or Sherrie might want to comment as well. But if that has happened, if an elector felt like their person was head and shoulders above, and they were all, very certain that that person was going to win the election overwhelmingly, then putting that candidate down as number one and not ranking any of the others wouldn't have an effect if that candidate was that well liked. However, if they weren't, if it was just something that was that person's opinion, and he was asking for only one vote or one place, he's jeopardizing. I mean, he's, as a candidate, I just don't understand why you would not want to have yourself ranked number 2 if you weren't the first choice of somebody, because that number 2 vote, depending upon how things play out, may in fact give you the majority rather than the less than majority. And so, I think it takes care of itself that way.
Kelleen or Sherrie, have either of you heard anything from your citizens about strategy or confusion about tallying that you think you want to answer for all of us here?
The one thing I would like to say, in Sandy City, we have 8 candidates for mayor. And we've heard from voters that they're perplexed that there's 8 candidates. I'm not sure why our law didn't allow for a limit as to how many could be ranked, where many jurisdictions do have a limit of 3 or 5, for example. But I think for the voters, if you get down to number 8 or number 7 or number 6, by that time, you may not have won. wanted to cast a vote for those individuals at all, period. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's the point. I think they have to decide whether that is someone they would want to vote for under any circumstance when you get down into those numbers. And I think, you know, to speak to what Kory was saying, if you feel comfortable voting for the second and the third choice, that you should do so, because I see it as wanting to level the playing field a little bit. You know, if you only pick one and that person is phased out, would you not want to have another choice and maybe another choice? So I think it's whatever the individual voter feels comfortable with. You know, if they don't like any of the other choices and they really wouldn't want to vote for that person, then I would say they shouldn't. But, you know, we've got a little example that we ran in our office, and it was pizza toppings. And by the time I got down to the 6th, 7th, 8th pizza topping, I thought, I don't even care. I don't even like those pizza toppings. So I think you kind of have to apply that same type of strategy, you know, with the candidates, and decide whether there's someone you would really want to cast a vote for in those other levels.
But I
And I
guess just
think- I was just going to add, I think Sherrie brings up a very good point in terms of those candidates that are 6, 7, or 8. By the time you hit that level, typically the majority has already been reached. So, I mean, you're not going to get that far down into a round by round tally, typically, or rarely would happen.
Okay.
Shauna,
Kelleen, did you want to say something about that?
go ahead,
Yeah,
Kelly.
just I'm still seeing it happening in my city. Someone recent, just like before this call, sent me a picture of their ballot. I voted, and I noticed on the council race, they only picked one person, because that's sort of been the strategy is, you know, this is my favorite. And I always tell people, you can't hurt your favorite candidate if you vote for the others. It's just whether, if you could care less, if you don't care at all about who else makes it, if yours doesn't make it, then just vote for your candidate if that makes you feel better. But some people are trying to put things out there. There's points, and don't vote for anyone for second or third. And so there is some confusion, but we're working on continuing the education process as people are looking at these ballots. So that's my response.
So Shauna, there's something that's interesting in plurality voting. If you have a multi-winner race and you have a block of voters that only vote for you, you get a statistical advantage to win that race. Whereas with ranked choice voting, there's no statistical advantage for only voting for one. Keep in mind, these are all backup votes. So your candidate, your number one, stays in the race until they get the fewest votes in a round. And then they go out because they had the fewest overall votes in the round. And then your backup kicks in and you go to your number two. But as long as your number one is in the race, then your vote keeps counting for your number one choice. So there's no penalty for ranking multiple candidates. And there's every reason to do it, because if your number one does not make it past an early round, then you're disenfranchised for the rest of the election.
Right.
And one of the great things about ranked choice voting is that you get to stay in it until the final person is elected.
Very helpful. Thank you. For my next question, actually is for you, Kelleen. And you already started answering it just a little bit naturally, but we really just wanted to hear from you about where areas in which some of your voters may have found it confusing, and how you've handled that, what you've done to help kind of eliminate some of that confusion.
Thank you. That's a great question. You know, the only confusion I've seen is when people have said something on social media that's not accurate. And so I tend to respond myself, you know, when they say, you know, there's points and you don't want to vote for the second one because they'll get a point. And I'm like, no, there's no points. That's not how it works. But I haven't seen much of it. And I haven't had, I don't think I've had an email or a direct question about it yet. And so I'm pretty hopeful that it's somewhat intuitive. I don't think the counting is necessarily intuitive, but I think when someone gets a ballot and it says rank these choices, pretty much everybody knows how to rank things.
Yeah.
So I really haven't had, minus those couple small Facebook incidents where someone didn't understand, I haven't really had anybody complaining or saying they were confused by it yet.
Great. Great. Does anybody else want to say anything about where they've heard about some confusion and how it's been handled?
The only other thing that we have heard in the question, and it was something we had to work through with our legal counsel, is if someone ranks the same person for a number of their choices. We call it duplicate ranking, over ranking, and the law is silent on that as to how that's handled. And it isn't considered an overvote. Our legal counsel did decide that, thank goodness.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out whether then that penalized the voter and they couldn't have subsequent votes counted after that. And because the law is silent on that, and I discussed this with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and we agreed that the voter would not be penalized, and that the next subsequent ranking, the first one would be counted. And if that one is eliminated or phased out, the subsequent ranking that would be moved up. So we were glad that we could come to that conclusion. But that's the other thing. People think that they love this person and they're going to rank that person for their first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth choice, which doesn't help. And so that's the other question we're answering quite often.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Anybody else before we go to the next question? Okay, so next up, we'd like each of you to answer this one. And I'm going to actually start with you, Kory, if that's okay. It's what do you see as the future for ranked choice voting?
Within the state or nationally?
Well, let's start with the state, if that's okay. And then,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
So,
I've got broader hope for the
okay,
national group.
do
but,
both.
yeah, no, within the state, I think what we need to do is we need to allow the pilot program that we've started to come forward and evaluate the data. Based on that data, my hope is that the voters overwhelmingly, as was the case 2 years ago in 2 of the cities that tried ranked choice voting, wanted to continue that opportunity. And frankly, I would like to see it expanded into possibly partisan elections on a primary level, and allow the primary candidates to be selected using an RCV election as well.
You want to say something about the nation?
Yeah, the nation, I think, I alluded to it during my first comment. I think the type of politics that we're seeing nationally gives people a bad taste in their mouth. And if whatever we can do to encourage and entice people to want to be able to vote and have a solid representative democracy, then I think it's to our advantage, and I see RCV as doing that.
Kelleen, can you be next?
You bet. I am so optimistic about the future of ranked choice voting, both nationally and in our state. I'll start with the national. I've also done some work with the National Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, and I continue to collaborate with them. And as of recent count, I think they had some organization from 40 states, whether it was just a small group in one city or a statewide effort or a county effort, to try and see what they can do to get some type of ranked choice voting at some level in their state. And to me, the most important thing is that the voters do like it, like consistently in all of the elections, the vast majority of voters say they like it and they want to do it again. We saw that in our pilot in Utah. We've seen it in the party conventions. And like Kory said, it's so important that people want to stay engaged in our democracy, that they feel like elections matter, that they feel like their voice matters. And I think anything we can do to make people not feel frustrated and want to throw up their hands and say, oh, the system's rigged and it doesn't matter what I do, I might as well not vote. I think it's important to do that. And that's what I see with ranked choice voting. Again, with our state, I think we saw a drastic increase in the number of cities that wanted to participate this year. I've been working with those cities. Everyone's excited. I think it's just something that's really a positive thing for the voters, and I expect to see it continue.
Thanks. Stan.
Well, I'd like to see it used as we consider election reform in Utah for partisan races. And I'm hopeful, we've been a part of that discussion the last couple of years as the legislature and the governor have worked together on election reform. They've not actually enacted much of it yet, but I know that we continue to be a part of that discussion. And so I'd love to see some of that happen. And then nationally, we've got Maine and Alaska now that use it statewide. And there's a growing number of cities that are using it. There are a growing number of states using it for military and overseas ballots in partisan elections. And so as people become more and more familiar with it, I think the way it works is this, and most of the polling we've done in the state tell us that this is true. Until you use ranked choice voting, you're very skeptical. Mm-hmm. Once you use it and you see how easy it is, and you get a chance to understand how it works, you become a fan. And so we had 82.5% of the voters in Payson and Vineyard 2 years ago say, we love the experience and we want to do it again. We don't know, we're going to do some of that exit polling in this election as well. And we're optimistic that we'll have a large percentage of voters that are in favor of it in Utah too. So anyway, I'm optimistic both in state and nationally that we're going to see more and more ranked choice voting.
Great. Sherrie, maybe wrap us up. What do you see as the future?
You know, I think what Kory mentioned, that it could be applied in a partisan primary situation. My concern in applying it in the general election, and this is purely from an administrative point, you saw the size of the ballot for Sandy. The mayor's race took one whole side of the ballot. With a vote by mail system where it hasn't been applied in Maine. I mean, they don't have a vote by mail system. And I've talked to Stan and Kory both about this. They have mostly in-person voting on voting machines. It isn't a problem, but we don't have an in-person voting system. So when I look at the size of the real estate on a ballot, for vote by mail with just the size of one contest as an example. And I went back and I looked at how many contests would have been ranked choice, for example, in the November 2020 election in Salt Lake County. And there would have been between, depending on where you lived, 6 and 7 ranked choice contests. The ballot would have been pages and pages. And so the complexity of that, the cost of that, and I'm talking about complexity in, you know, people maybe mailing back one page of their ballot and not sending the second page. And then for every voter, we've got to have the affidavit, and the cost for every page, we estimate it would cost at least $200,000 for an extra ballot page. And all of those things, and that doesn't include the time scanning, the extra pages. The adjudication piece of it is a concern. We got information from San Francisco that their adjudication rate is 15%, and they've been doing ranked choice voting since 2009, I believe. And ours has not nearly been that high, but this will be a good test to see how much adjudication we're actually going to be able or have to do because of, you know, the choices and people crossing out things and making changes on their ballot, and us having to have teams of people adjudicating. So those are the unknown things about ranked choice voting. And to apply it to a general election, we know that our ballot size would increase tremendously in a general election. And so from an administrative standpoint, that's where I'm coming from, just the complexity of that.
So those are some hurdles we're going to have to really think through if we do move forward into the future that Stan and Kory and Kelleen have described, is what I'm hearing you say. Does anybody?
Yeah, and again,
Donna, can I ask Sherrie a question?
Yeah,
related?
sure.
Sherrie, if that's all right.
Yes,
Sherrie,
it's a conversation.
thank you. Sherrie, just for the presidential candidates in the last general elections, how many pages would the ballot have taken just for that, if we were to be ranking them?
You know, that's another thing I was looking at, Kory. And one of the things, we don't have a landscape ballot right now. You'd have to limit the number to be ranked. So we couldn't have them all ranked. We can rank up to 10, but then, you know, if they spill over onto the other side of the ballot, even if we had a landscape, and if you could rank that many across, which ones are going to go on the back page? And I was trying to remember how many we had. And that would be unfortunate if you had so many candidates that some of them end up on the flip side of the ballot. So, you know, with the landscape, you've got a smaller area on the front page. So that's a downside. And I think that if we implemented, even in a primary, and I know Representative Winder's bill last time had a limit of the number of rankings, and that was a good thing. So I think in a partisan primary, there wouldn't be that many contests that we couldn't accommodate it. I think we could without a 2-page even. But when you apply it to a general election, then you get into a whole different complexity of the number of pages and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my ballot 2 years ago, and I bet there were 15 or more just presidential candidates on there.
Yeah, and when I said that there was between 6 and 7 contests, depending on where you live, that would be ranked choice, I wasn't counting the presidential contest. So those were just the contests local, the congressional, and some of the county races, the state school board. And I have examples of those. But anyway, that's the concern with the general election ballot.
Yeah.
So let me ask all of you guys before we end this part and start taking questions from our audience. You know, many of you have mentioned that this is a pilot, that's what the legislature has given us permission to do, a pilot. So I'd like to hear from each one of you how you think we should measure whether it's a success. What should the measurement be about whether ranked choice voting is a success? And let's see, let's start with you this time, Stan.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I think there are multiple measures of success, and I really think it should be a comprehensive look. And we promised a fairly deep dive, both in quantitative data and qualitative data. So on the quantitative side, did we get greater voter turnout? How many voters ranked how many candidates? So like, are there very many instances where they only ranked one, which would show that they really didn't understand ranked choice voting very well. I think just going into the results of elections and seeing how those rounds went and how the outcomes took place, and I think seeing if those outcomes make sense. You know, in every election, there's a brand new challenger that beats a well-established incumbent that's a surprise. And you get about the same number of surprises in ranked choice voting that you get in plurality elections. So it'll be interesting to see what the data shows. But then I think the qualitative data needs to be factored into this as well. So what was the voter perception? Did they have a good experience? Do they want to use it again? Did they understand it? What was their experience like? I think that is equally as important as the quantitative side of the equation. But I think you need to take all of that information and start sifting through it to see if it makes sense for Utah. And we're looking forward to doing just that.
Awesome. Awesome. Sherrie, what would you say?
Well, of course, my measure of a successful election is not to have a contested election. And, you know, obviously, we have great pride in the fact that that hasn't happened since I've been in office. And we don't want that to happen. We want voters to feel comfortable and confident in the results. And so, you know, one of the things I am a little concerned about, and maybe Stan and Kory, you can weigh in, we've been told by our legal counsel that we cannot do a recount for an RCV contest. They've gone through the statute and said that it's not allowed. And I don't know if you have any insight into that, but one of the things that we've been able to do in close contests is do a recount. And I know that we've had some very close municipal elections, and we've done recounts for those elections. And I can vividly remember one in 2017 where the vote was just 3 votes difference. We did a recount, and it was heartbreaking because the candidate who lost cried when we did the recount, and it came out the same. But nevertheless, I'm not sure why it doesn't allow for a recount, but I have always liked to do a recount when it was very close so that we could prove the results. And that's what we've been told by our legal counsel, and they've looked into it. So my goal is always to do an election and have it turn out and have the candidates and the voters feel confident in it.
Kory, what
Dan,
do
do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
I actually think Kelleen might have some of the latest information on that particular question.
Great.
It was interesting because Sherrie brought that to my attention, and I was talking to Josh Daniels in Utah County, and his legal counsel has a different interpretation, which is so interesting. Attorneys, they all have their own definitions of words and everything else. So what I did is I sent an email to the Lieutenant Governor's office and requested some type of interpretation so that the counties could rely on that if this situation comes up for the need for a recount. I received an email back that they would look into it. Then I received another email that they're still thinking about it and looking into it, but we have not received any formal answer from the Lieutenant Governor's office at this point.
Thank you, Kelleen. I certainly hope that they say we can do a recount if it's needed. Thank you.
I would hope so. It doesn't make any sense to not have that option if something is really close.
Well, and that surprises me because the pilot program legislation, I thought it spelled out pretty clearly, should a recount occur within that legislation, if I recall. So I'm surprised that that your counsel has said that there wasn't an opportunity to do that.
We might need to get them all in a room, because we also had the legal counsel from the Resource Center had looked at it, and they thought it was obvious that you could do it. And so maybe if they're all getting a room, but I was hoping the Lieutenant Governor's office would do some definitive letter, and they just haven't. So
Yeah.
Well, Kory, how do you think we should measure success?
I think that the greatest measure of success is voter turnout. I think if this brings more people to the polls and they're more enthusiastic in terms of casting their vote, I think that's a success. That's a win. And obviously that is a subjective kind of measure that you have to go after. The beauty of what we did 2 years ago, Payson and Vineyard, it was small enough that we could basically survey the whole voting group, those that voted, and from that we were able to determine that RCV was something that they wanted to have continue, and it was something they saw as favorable. So I think whatever we can do to get to that information as far as data goes, I think that could help us. If it doesn't encourage more voter turnout, and then we've got to find something else that does, because absent that, we're in trouble.
Can I just say that we had a 90% turnout in our general election of a record number of registered voters. So, and by the way, 100,000 additional voters over 2016. So I think the municipal elections, I agree, Kory, that's where we've struggled for voter turnout.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you're addressing, it's hard. And many of the contests are uncontested. So
Right.
That's difficult. Candidates just didn't file. We have a number of them that are uncontested. But as far as voter turnout, oh my word, we were just amazed at the turnout in the 2020 general election.
That was a record turnout, wasn't it?
Well, it
Sure.
was, but we've also had
Within the
other very high turnouts. For example, 2018, an 82% turnout in a midterm election. And again, a record number of registered voters. So we've had a good record of turnout. So you know, I think the municipal elections have suffered as far as turnout. In fact, I did an interview today with the Deseret News and predicting turnout. I'm saying, you know, maybe 30 to 35%. We haven't seen ballots coming in very well. I tried to impress upon them the importance of these municipal contests. They're making decisions about development in their communities, police, fire protection, snow removal. But I think it's because they don't have the money to campaign and people aren't as familiar with them. But nevertheless, it's disappointing. And I don't know how we get people more engaged in the municipal contests.
Well, and to that point, I mean, one of the advantages of RCV is moving to away from a primary election where the voter turnout is abysmal. I mean, it's half. Maybe not half, but it's a lot lower. So you've got a smaller group of people selecting who the candidate's going to be in each of these primary elections. And ultimately within Utah, often it's the Republican Party or Republican candidate that is selected in those June elections that is the candidate that will be elected in the fall. And whatever we can do to get more people to the polls in any election is critical.
Thank you. So Kelleen, anything to add? What does success look like to you?
I think everyone's pretty much covered it. Stan's outlined it pretty well. I think of it in terms of a mayor looking at my city.
Yeah.
And if the people like it and they tell the city council they like it, I think that will be a success because the city council will have to vote if they want to do it again in 2 years. And it will almost be entirely based on the experience of the voters and if they say they liked it and want to do it again.
Okay, great. Well, thanks to all of you for your attention to these questions. And now I'm going to ask Donnie Davis, who is the League of Women Voters Salt Lake Program Director, to start teeing up some of the questions from our audience. Donnie?
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you, panelists. Our first question is, we understand that the Legislature Judiciary Committee was considering ranked choice voting today. Can you tell us if there's any change in the wind or what that was all about?
Okay, does anybody, were any of you up there today? Were any of you there firsthand?
Yeah, I was there,
Okay.
and I'm trying to remember the Judiciary Committee and what they talked about. I think there was some talk of election reform, but I don't know that RCV was necessarily the topic.
Yeah, they were talking about auditing the 2020 election.
Yeah,
That was the big issue on their agenda today. And in the end, they voted to go ahead and go to the next item. So they didn't take any action on that. It was interesting to see the proponents of an audit versus the defenders of our election process. And I was very proud of our county clerks for standing up and defending the integrity of our elections today.
And you know, I listened to that hearing, and honestly, that group, which I feel is a minority of the representation of our citizens,
absolutely.
were very noisy. And many of them got up and said they wanted a forensic audit of our 2020 election, and we don't like ranked choice voting. And I don't know how they've tied those two things together, but you guys probably heard the same thing from quite a number of the proponents of the forensic audit of the 2020 election. And I was thinking, and how did they tie this together? But I have to tell you that in our logic and accuracy test, we have had more people attend that, not only for our primary, but then again for the general election. And it became a very noisy group. And some of them were there because of the election integrity idea, but some of them were there complaining about ranked choice voting. And it was really disheartening. We had a city recorder that actually left because she said, I can't stand this. She couldn't hear what was going on because they were hollering out. And she said she was so upset at how unprofessional and how they acted. And it was, we were doing the logic and accuracy for her election too, but she left because it was so disruptive.
Pointing.
Do you think that there's a need for citizens who, at this moment, for citizens who are in favor of it in response to what happened at the Capitol today, to reach out and let their legislators know that they want to let the process and the pilot unfold, and that they feel good about ranked choice voting? Or do you think we just don't worry too much about it because it seems like it was a minority of people?
Well, like they say, it's the squeaky wheel that often gets the attention. And whatever we can to buoy up those that are in the position to make those decisions, to avoid the noise of that squeaky wheel, I think we're served well.
Great, thank you.
You know, the Lieutenant Governor and Ricky Hatch, our president of our County Clerk Association, did a tremendous job today. And the Lieutenant Governor sat all through that. And it was disheartening to hear some of the disinformation, misinformation that was put out. But nevertheless, they somehow, many of them were tying ranked choice voting to the concerns about the election integrity. But I have to say that I have received, out of 549,000 people that cast ballots in the 2020 general election in Salt Lake County, I have received about 85 affidavits asking for a forensic audit, and about 7 of these little clever postcards, and less than 10 emails. So it is not a mandate by any means. And so, but they are noisy, and Kory, you're right. They made a lot of noise today, but compared to the huge masses of people that voted, it was a noisy minority.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to say anything about this one before we go on to the next question? Okay, Donnie, what do you have?
Thank you. Kathy Beely asked, the league appreciates Utah's vote by mail system and how successful it's been, largely because of Ms. Swensen's leadership. This won't change with ranked choice voting, will it? And is the mail voting at risk in the legislature?
Let's start with you on that, Sherrie, since you're the one.
I think if the vote by mail is at risk, it would be because of this group that was there today. That was one of the things that they touted ongoing. They wanted to do away with vote by mail. They don't want machines to count ballots. They want them hand counted at a precinct level by human beings, which is ridiculous with the number of ballots that we have and the number of contests on a ballot. So I have concerns if we do ranked choice voting in a general election, only because of the size that it would require on a ballot.
Anybody else want to take that one on? What was the second part of that? Donnie, just remind me to make sure that we answered the second part.
Okay.
Is it in trouble?
This won't change the ranked choice voting, will it? And is the mail voting at risk in the legislature?
No,
I would say not. I've not heard anybody in the legislature say that they wanted to do away with the vote by mail option.
Can I just tell you?
Last election.
Yeah, so Catherine and the rest of you, here's my opinion. Like 30 or 40 years ago, Utah had one of the best voter participation rates in the country. And then over decades, we became one of the bottom quartile of voter participation rates in the country. Vote by mail, which Sherrie really spearheaded in Salt Lake County, changed that game. And so when we talk about 80-some percent, 88% voted in the off-year election in 2018 and 90% voted in 2020, much of that is due to vote by mail. And so we don't want to go back to where our voter participation rates were among the lowest in the nation. We want to give our citizens the opportunity to vote. And so I don't think it's in trouble, but we're told by leaders that we need to be vigilant, and the world is run by those who show up. And so today, a group of voters showed up who were making the case, And other voters need to show up and make the case that this is not a good idea to get rid of vote by mail. And so, but I think the legislature in general, because of how successful it's been, will be very reticent to make any changes to that.
Thank you. Anybody else wanted to say anything on that? Okay, Donnie, what's our next question?
Helen Moser asks, there seems to be a misperception amongst voters opposed to ranked choice voting that it can take several weeks to finalize the results. How long will it take in a race where the field is as deep as 5 to 6 candidates?
Okay. Kelleen, do you want to answer that one?
You bet. So if we were counting by hand, maybe it would take a few extra weeks. There's another reason to not to maintain our vote counting machines. Really, it's just one more step. So the counties, there's different voting systems. Salt Lake uses Dominion, other counties use ES&S, but they come up with a cast vote record and then they run it through a tabulator, at least in the ES&S system. And Sherrie can talk about Dominion. I remember last time, I think Amelia said it took a few extra minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So every time a county would be able to produce traditional results, within a few minutes, they can produce ranked choice voting results. The reason that elections are taking longer is sometimes something is postmarked at the right time, but it takes a few days to come in. The counties have a lot of ballots to count. We have what's called provisional ballots, where somebody, for some reason, there's some confusion about whether they really are registered, and there has to be a little bit of research before that ballot's counted. And sometimes that takes a little longer, but it has nothing to do with ranked choice voting that would extend the time of getting the results.
And if I could add to that, Kelleen, that was an excellent description, but also election results are never final until the boards of canvassers certify the results. And those results are not certified until, in this case, for this election, November 16th, 2 weeks after the election. And the reason being is because we have individuals, if their signature on their affidavit didn't match, if it wasn't signed by Utah state law, they have until 5 p.m. on the day before the meeting of the Board of Canvassers to come to the county clerk's office and present an affidavit or send in an affidavit so we can count their ballot. We have ballots coming from afar, from people overseas in the military, and they can arrive up until noon on the day of the Board of Canvassers. And also people can drop their ballots in a drop box or deliver them at the vote center on the day of the election on November 2nd. And we have to go through and verify every signature, and we have to have time to process those ballots. So election night results have never been the final results. There's always a lot of work to be done through that canvassing period, and the results are never final. Ranked choice voting is not going to make it any longer or any different than it has been in the past.
Thank you. Kory?
Can I just interject one thing?
Yeah.
Remind your listeners as well. The last general election that we had in 2020, we had a congressional race that we didn't know the results for a very long time. We had numerous House member races that flipped from the time of the election day closing till the canvass. And so RCV isn't going to, time is time in elections. It just takes time to be able to process the ballots.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, Donnie, next.
Helen also says, in the voter registration events, we seem to get far more enthusiasm from young voters than from older voters regarding the use of ranked choice voting. Are there ways that Utah Ranked Choice Voting Org and the county clerks could capitalize on the support of the youth?
Anybody want to take this first? Capitalizing on the youth?
If I could just, I'm part of a nonprofit board called Voterize. And this is a group that is dedicated basically to try and energize the youth vote. 18 to 29, I think, is the group, and the reason is because it's that group that has had traditionally the apathy and just not voted. So we've been working to try and register those people to vote, and interestingly enough, over the course of the last, I'm going to say 5 years, we've been able to bring that that vote up, but it's still below what it should be. So if RCV is a vehicle whereby the youth feel more empowered, then you know, hats off, and let's keep moving forward.
Just let everyone, thank you, Kory. I'll just let everyone know that Stan had another obligation and needed to drop, but said thank you to all of the audience and everyone for having him participate. So I'll just let you all know that. Does anybody want to add anything about engaging the youth or about demographic acceptance of ranked choice voting in general? Anything to add?
Good boy.
Anything else? Okay, what's the next question?
Okay, first of all, Kathy Beebe said that we should mention that the league believes in voter education, and our Vote 411 application makes that easier. You can put in your address and get a personalized ballot with the candidates' answers to your questions. It's a great way to get to know all the candidates. And our next question is, what challenges are created when races have a crowded field of candidates? And what steps would you take to mitigate them?
Sherrie, why don't you take that one on, because you already talked to us a little bit about some of the challenges in Sandy, et cetera.
You know, honestly, Sandy City has done an excellent job. They put out, I live in Sandy, by the way, they put out a mailer, and they had a profile on every one of those candidates for mayor, and it was excellent, even for their city council races. So they've done a great job. When people are calling our office and asking for information on candidates, you know, some of the candidates submitted profiles to the lieutenant governor's office to have their profile put on the vote.utah.gov website. Some didn't. We're hearing about that. Some people are complaining because we don't have information about the candidates on our website. We have a link to the lieutenant governor's website, but nevertheless, we have a list of candidates on our website, and they have included their web addresses if they have a website. We've tried to get the information for people so they can get that knowledge when they vote for their candidates. And we tell them they can email the candidates, they can call the candidates, they can look them up and do a search for the candidates and get the information that they want to know about them. One of the things that we're getting asked a lot for this election is what their party affiliation is. And we're explaining these are nonpartisan elections, and some of the people aren't happy to hear that we will not be able to provide a party affiliation for nonpartisan elections.
Does anybody else want to say anything about that crowded field question? Okay, well, I want to thank all four of you actually for just walking us through this and answering our questions. And I just wanted to pause and give each one of you an opportunity to sort of wrap up or share any final thoughts about ranked choice voting, anything you want to leave us with. And I will go ahead. Let's go ahead and start with you, Kelleen, if that's okay. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say kudos to the League of Women Voters. So in Heber, my city recorder was just getting organized and deciding how to do this voter outreach. And I was at the farmer's market, and sure enough, like one of the first weeks after the farmer's market opened, I walk over and there's the League of Women Voters at their table doing voter registration. They had taken stuff off the internet about ranked choice voting. They had a little QR code so you could do on and go and do a sample ranked choice vote. So I feel like it has been a team effort with all of us trying to make sure the voters are educated about ranked choice voting and make sure that they have a good shot to do this and decide if the public and the voters of Utah like it. So thank you for all your efforts with the league. I know they're doing a lot of work in Salt Lake and in other counties, and I'm excited to see how it all turns out. So thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much. Kory?
I would just echo what Kelleen said about the League of Women Voters. It seems like your army of people have a greater influence than I think many people understand. Sorry about that. The dogs are barking. The other thing I'd like to just say is I'd like to compliment Sherrie for the way she has run elections for so many years and the innovation that she has introduced, be it, vote by mail or any other thing. And thank her for being willing to work with us on this election cycle with RCV. I know it's anytime it's something new is introduced, it doesn't happen just by happenstance. It takes hard work, and I just a tip of the hat to the clerk's office.
Thank you. And Sherrie, what are your last thoughts?
Well, I'm glad and proud that we, with a lot of hard work from our staff, and it will also be from poll workers and a lot of temporaries that we've been able to offer the ranked choice option to the cities who want to go that route. And I feel comfortable that we're going to provide a great election for the voters in those jurisdictions, along with the ones who decided that they wanted to do the standard version. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing how people react to it. Like I said, the ones we hear from are the ones that are upset. I don't think that reflects the majority of the people at all. I think the ones that are happy with it are silent. So I think we'll get a very good idea of how it all turns out, and hopefully we can get some feedback and some good information from overall how they feel about it.
Thank you. And so thank you one last time, panelists, for taking the time to educate us, and also to our members in the community, guests for attending. Don't forget that this is actually going to be, the recording of this will be available on the league website after this, and we get a lot of post-meeting video views. So please go to our website, lwvsl.org, probably after tomorrow, and watch it and share the link with others. And as a reminder to everyone before you go, please don't forget to provide comments on redistricting to the Utah Independent Redistricting Commission before the end of this week. And I'm going to put that link back into the chat for all of you. And then finally, I'd like to invite everyone to next month's general meeting of the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake, where we're going to be partnering with several other local organizations, including the NAACP of Salt Lake branch, the Salt Lake branch of the NAACP, ACLU Utah, and the Better Utah Institute, to continue our series of virtual panel discussions on police reform. This time, our topic is Diplomas, Not Defendants, Breaking the School to Prison Pipeline in Utah. It will be moderated by ABC4 journalist Rosie Nguyen, and our panelists are James Yapias, Education Chair of the NAACP Salt Lake Branch, Pam Vickery, Chair of the Sentencing Commission and Executive Director of Utah Juvenile Defenders, Mindy Holmdahl, Director of Student Services for the Salt Lake City School District, and Toya Reynolds, an advocate for formerly incarcerated people who has lived experience with this issue. That event is November 17th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. You can register or find out about all of the league's activities and future meetings by checking out our website at lwvsl.org. Thanks again to everyone, and have a lovely week. Take care. Bye-bye.